Welcome back to Actuate's web series. Today's topic is automating the performance improvement process. Let's begin by looking at the reasons for setting up an automation. It might be to reduce time on system maintenance, like letting the automation handle the backup of your database or the archiving of report design files. It might be to eliminate maintenance oversights, like making sure that critical data import is run before you generate your monthly board report or go into your regularly scheduled meetings. We can also use automation to streamline regular tasks, like making sure that each task is performed before any task that depends on it. And finally, we can use automation to optimize server workload. That way we can spread out the processing power of the computer across the entire day and preload content that's requested by many users at once. Automations can occur at different layers within the product stack. So let's look at each layer and the process for configuring an automation independently. First is the scorecard layer, where we'll be using the command line utility pbvcon to execute our automations. In order to do that, we need to first configure and verify the scorecard object or process that's going to be automated. Then we can create and test the batch file which calls that scorecard object. And finally, we can schedule that process with Windows Scheduler. At the iServer layer, we'll be using BERT report scheduling. What we'll do here is configure and verify a report design file. Then we'll define any parameters, schedule, priority level, output format, and file path that are required by that report design. Here are just a few examples of some of the automations that can be programmed at the scorecard layer. They might be importing or exporting data, generating a data mart for reporting purposes, or they might be administrative, like moving the calendar, synchronizing hierarchies and data, or copying and backing up your database. Finally, we might use this to generate email alerts and internet libraries for consumption on the web. There are many more options, so please contact your Actuate representative to find out more. Let's now look more closely at the creation of a batch file used for executing a scorecard automation. To create that batch file, we'll be doing a couple of different steps. First, we'll call on the executable for pbvcon. On the right, you can see the file path where pbvcon resides on my server. Next, we need to provide it with a command. In this case, I'm using the command generate internet library, but there are many other commands that are available to you. Next, we'll define the server, database, and user who are going to be executing this process. And then finally, we'll define any other required values according to the command you've requested. That could be a scorecard object name, an output file name and file path, or a period value. It all depends on the command you're providing. So let's jump into a little scorecard automation demonstration here. So I'll bring up my scorecard interface. What we see here is a data export. So I've configured that this export works perfectly. I don't get any kind of errors or problems running this. And I'll show you here that the destination for this export is a CSV file on my desktop in a folder called batch exports. I also have here in my scorecard an internet library that I'm going to be generating through an automation. And again, I've confirmed that this internet library generates perfectly, no problems there. And I've also set it to generate to a folder on my desktop called batch exports. So once we've confirmed that our objects are working as they should, I can actually close down, log out of the scorecard. I really don't even need it open for this part of the process. What I'll do is I'll navigate to the folder where my batch processes are stored, which for me is in the program files folder. In the BERT Performance Scorecard install directory, in the server folder, I have a special folder here called batch processes. So let's take a look first at the data export batch file. So here it is as a text file. I just want to break it up into a couple of pieces. First, we have our command to run pbvcon there on the first line. On the second line, I have my instruction to pbvcon, which is run data export. Then I have my server name, database name, user information, and then finally on the last line here, the data export object that I'd like to run. So I'm just going to close that without saving so it stays all on one line, and I'm going to rename it to BAT for batch file. Let's take a quick look at the internet library one as well. So what you'll see here, same basic information, my path to pbvcon, a command generate internet library for my server, database, user, and there's the object name, employee library. So again, I'll change that file extension to BAT. Now, each of these batch files could be engaged just by double-clicking on it. It'll run that batch file, and you'll even see the command prompt window pop up, and there's my confirmation. So it exported my data. I could now go check my batch exports folder and confirm there's my Leaf data export. Let's also go ahead and generate our internet library here. This one's going to take just a little bit longer, but you'll notice it starts cranking through and generating each of the sections that's a part of that book, that's a part of that internet library. And that one wasn't too long, so again, I can check my batch exports folder, and there's my internet library. The last batch file that I have here is a database export, so let's just take a quick look at that. Again, we call pbvcon, but then this time I'm using the command run database export. Again, my same server, database, and user information, but then I need to specify in the batch file a file path at which to store the SBF file. So again, I've pointed it to the batch exports folder on my desktop. So let's just change this to a BAT file. And we can go ahead and run this one as well. Now this one should take just a little bit longer because it actually has to take the database offline, so it does a little bit more work. But what I like about this is on this one you get a little progress indicator. So it looks like that one's moving pretty quickly, shouldn't take too long to finish that export. So we could automate this export process to occur every night and take an automated backup. There we go, process completed, and now in my batch exports folder I should have my sample corporate database export. So if we wanted that database export to occur every night at the middle of the night, we could schedule that with the Windows Task Scheduler. So I'll open up Windows Task Scheduler here. And what I want to do is just create a new task. I'll call this task Scorecard DB Backup. And I'll say we want to run it whether or not I'm logged into the system. And then finally, I just need to configure my trigger. My trigger in this case is the batch file. So I'll set my schedule here. Schedule will be daily at, say, 2 a.m. And then let's configure the batch file. So there we go. We've set our action as the batch file. Our calendar is, our trigger is every day at 2 a.m. So all we need to do is say OK, and it'll ask you to quickly authenticate so that it knows you're permitted to take that task. And there we have it. If we look in our task scheduler library, you'll see our task available here. So that'll run every night in the middle of the night. So if I wanted to schedule this task to run automatically, all I would need to do is set up a task with Windows Task Scheduler. So I'll open up Task Scheduler here. I'm going to go to the Action menu and create a new task. I'll call this Scorecard DB Backup. And I'll just configure this so that it runs regardless of whether or not I'm logged into the machine. Next, triggers. This is basically the schedule on which you want it to occur. So I'll create a new trigger here. I'll say I'd like for this to run daily at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I'll set that to 2 a.m. And now all I need to do is go to my Actions menu and set up my actual action here. In this case, the action is to start a program, and that script is the actual batch file itself. So I've navigated to my install directory where I have a batch processes folder, and I can just point to the DB export batch file. Say OK, and OK once more, and it'll ask you to authenticate to make sure you're allowed to schedule that particular task. And there we go. So if we look in our task scheduler library, we'll see our task for our Scorecard database backup, and that'll run in the middle of the night or at 2 a.m. Every night. Let's now look briefly at report scheduling, which occurs at the iServer layer. Some of the benefits of scheduling your reports are to generate them to a variety of output formats, like RPT document, PDF, XLS, Microsoft Word, and many more. We can also reduce end-user load times by preloading many of the reports they'll be requesting in the off hours. We can free up iServer resources for the analysts using live data by preloading those reports for other users that don't really need truly live data. And finally, we can ensure that all report documents are updated on a regular basis. In order to do this, we'll need to log into the management console of the iServer and locate the RPT design file we wish to schedule. We'll use the Properties menu and select Scheduling, and there we'll be able to define the schedule to be used, the priority to be set for this schedule, and the output format, as well as file path, parameters, and other options. Let's take a closer look. So one last piece to our demonstration here is report scheduling at the iServer level. So here I'm at my management console login. So I just need to log into the iServer management console here. And I've got a couple of report designs available to me to go ahead and schedule. So once you've confirmed that your report design runs as you expect and gives you the expected output, we can just use this little menu to choose schedule, and that'll bring up the report scheduler window. First things first, we need to make sure we give a name to this job, although usually it'll use the report design name, so that's usually just fine. Next, we can set up the schedule on which it should recur. So why don't we say every Monday at 6 a.m. And we can set our priority level for this particular one. I'll set the priority level low, and I'll assign it to the default BERT factory that will generate this report. A couple of things, you don't have to necessarily address all of these, but I want to make sure that this one always runs with the latest version of the report design. That way, if I update the report design in a way that I think it needs to be changed, that change will be reflected in the automated output. Let's see, we'll say do not retry on this particular one. Let's look at the parameters menu now. So this is where I'm going to be asked to provide some parameters for this report, because this report has some parameter values that need to be filled in, so I can fill these in. So just select the parameters as you normally would do. So I'll just fill in a couple of values here. Okay, so there are my parameters, and last but probably most important, we want to define our output settings. So in my case, I want to output this, let's say, to a PDF this time. So every Monday morning, this report design will run and generate a PDF document for me. Now I can specify exactly where it should drop this file. So I'll go ahead and say it should put it into my favorites folder. And let's always replace the latest version. And that's all there is to it. So it's going to set up this job for me. Now, if you want to take a look at any of the jobs you've already scheduled, you can go to the Jobs menu, and I should be able to see that's not running, so make sure you go to the Schedules tab. Here we go. There's my actual job. So if you need to make changes to it, you can modify it here under the Properties menu. But you can also go check and see once it's been completed, it would show up in this Completed tab. But that's about all there is to it. Once you've got a functional report design, it's really just a matter of setting up a quick and easy schedule on which to generate that report, define the settings, the schedule on which it's set to occur, the parameters, and the output information. It's that easy. So in closing, just a few key points to remember. First, always verify the functionality of a process before you schedule or automate that process. Next, order your automations according to the workflow. Make sure you run your data imports before your synchronization, before your visualization, before your backup. That way we can stack our automations into a single batch file or process, and we know that they'll be executed in the right order. Finally, try to schedule things during off-peak hours. That way we can take advantage of the low CPU usage in those off hours. So thanks for joining us today. Be sure to check out our website at bertperformanceanalytics.com, or you can contact me directly with questions. Thank you.